Senator Ludlam.
Thank you, Mr Deputy President. I'm only going to speak briefly on this bill as well, and the Australian Greens support the bill for much the same reasons that Senator Gallagher's just outlined. In fact, the Greens had agreed to let this bill go through in non-contro, so it's interesting to see it sneaking into government business. But nonetheless, it's a sensible bill. It's housekeeping, and it does underline the importance of digital radio broadcasts in the Australian market. But I did want to just take the opportunity while we're here to underline, as I've done quite a number of times in here, going back years under several different governments, the importance of the community radio sector and community radio broadcasters in particular. It's good that Senator Fifield is here for the debate, because this is a pretty serious fight brewing that can actually be avoided, or a disaster that can be avoided. And I went through this as a certain feeling of Groundhog Day here, because I've gone through this process and probably delivered a nearly identical speech when Senator Stephen Conroy was the Communications Minister, and the situation was eventually fixed, as I suggest Senator Fifield's going to be able to do as well. But it relates to the DRP, a three-letter acronym that stands for the Digital Radio Program, which supports community radio broadcasters to actually stay in the mix as the sector transitions across to digital. And nobody is suggesting that the analogue radio broadcast services are about to be ripped out from under them. This is a pretty slow burn. It's very different to the way that TV broadcasters switched over. But nonetheless, digital transmitters are becoming more prevalent, and much more importantly, I guess, receivers. As cars get upgraded that play digital radio and people invest in digital radio handsets in their homes and businesses, it is essential that our community radio stations around the country are there at the outset and aren't playing catch-up and aren't traipsing along after people have already found their favourite stations, or worse, that they simply blacked out and they're not there when people switch over to digital radio spectrums, that the community broadcasters are in their rightful place alongside the commercial radio broadcasters and the ABC and SBS. That I hope that this proposition is non-controversial, that they belong there, that they perform an immensely valuable public service, and they are in fact a key component of media diversity. And this is a debate that's about to be reignited again by rumours and reporting. Haven't seen any formal announcements yet that the government is actually going to rip open the debate again about media ownership and media concentration in this country. What more important role could the community broadcasters play at this time? When we talk about media diversity, that's who we're talking about. Independent voices, non-English speaking backgrounds, people with a diversity of political views, people coming from a variety of different cultural perspectives on our airwaves, telling Australian stories, unique stories, that you won't get heard on the big public broadcasters, ABC and SBS, and that you won't get heard on the commercial stations. And so here's the problem. The digital radio program, the DRP, was underfunded under the previous government, and it took, from recollection, it took more than a year to get this tiny amount of money put back into the budget. This is a program that was started by Senator Coonan in 2005 as a broader part of the media reform packages pursued by the former Howard government. It's non-controversial. There is cross-party support in this place for supporting our valuable community broadcasters to do what they do. And so what we see here, I'm assuming, is an oversight rather than malice. But what has occurred is the indexation freeze that took place in the 2014 federal budget, that unloved, friendless, hated budget that attacked nearly every corner of society and ultimately, you could argue, cost the former Prime Minister his job. That indexation pause, which obviously hits a number of portfolios, has created a gap between the costs of digital radio and the amount of public funding support that accumulates over time. And so a gap is opening up, a wedge is opening up. And when this happened under Senator Conroy, obviously different political context but same outcome, it forces the community broadcasters around the country into this rather appalling Hunger Games scenario where they are asked to decide which of them will go off the air. And it's that bad. It's which stations can will no longer be heard on the public airwaves. I don't assume that that is the outcome that Senator Fifield is seeking. In fact, we haven't heard from him or given him the opportunity to hear directly what the government's position is, but I'm going to assume in good faith that you are not hoping through the indexation pause from 2014 to knock to knock community broadcasters off the air in our cities and regions. I don't think that's what you're proposing. But as the Community Broadcasting Association of Australia has made abundantly clear, when you froze the indexation, that's opened up a gap. So what the sector is asking for is for the 2015-16 levels to be maintained but to be indexed so that they travel upwards at the same pace as costs travel gently upwards over time. And that means 3.686 million plus indexation. It's not going to allow them to employ any more staff. It's not going to allow them to create new and unique, creative, diverse content. It's simply going to allow them to keep the doors open and to stay on air. And I hope we would hear, as the Labor Party fixed this when they were in government, when Senator Conroy was minister, that before it comes to what it came to under that context where the broadcasters were actually running a campaign on air against the government, seeking base funding to stay alive, I hope it doesn't come to that again. I believe that this is an oversight rather than malice. That indexation pause needs to lift in the context of the size of the Commonwealth budget and, more importantly, the services that community broadcasters provide. Services to media diversity, services in terms of training up volunteers and the next generation of broadcasters across all those different skill sets, that we express our support rather than just paying it lip service, that we pay them the $3.8 million that they're going to need, and that we lift that indexation pause so that they can not have to feel like they either need to engage in some kind of broadcast campaign to alert their audiences to the threat that's looming, and more importantly, not have to go campaigning, behind the scenes to the Expenditure Review Committee and lobbying. It's the last thing I think they should be doing. They should be producing great content and supporting the health of the community broadcast sector. I hope Senator Fifield, whom I tipped off, and I've tipped his advisors off over the last couple of days that was going to bring this issue to the chamber, that you'll have something good to say for us so that we can all stand down, get on with the process of passing this bill and let our community broadcast sector do what it does best. I thank the chamber.